Well, hello there. My name is Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I have assembled my two best surround mix discussion buddies, Mike Vieira and, of course, Jonathan Cornell from ImmersiveAudioAlbum.com, to talk about Steven Wilson's new Atmos download version of Hand Cannot Erase, which is available from Steven's Headphone Dust Store. Which I will link in the description. So in the course of this video, we're going to answer some, I'm guessing, very pressing questions. When Wilson revisits his old mixes, it's usually a huge upgrade over the original. But in this case, Hand Cannot Erase was always one of his best sounding catalog titles. So I have to admit that I am approaching this with a little bit of skepticism, because it's like, this was always really great. And it took me a few listens to really make up my mind. So right from the get-go, I'm interested in your guys' thoughts. Does this improve upon the 5.1 version, and in what ways? And then I'm guessing as we get through that, we'll talk about more aspects of it, such as the concept of the album, the songs, how we feel about it, and so on. So I guess I'll turn it over to Mike first, since I think this is one of your favorite Steven Wilson albums, if not your favorite.
It's my number two. So yeah, Raven is my favorite. Hand Cannot Erase has long since been my second, ever since it came out. And so I just want to begin the discussion about whether this is an upgrade from the 5.1 by addressing this question to you guys and answering it from my perspective. So I'm listening on a 7.2.4 system. Got matched subwoofers up in the front of the room. I've got surround backs, and I've got front and rear heights. And Ian, I understand that you're listening on a 5.1.2 system.
That's correct, yeah.
And Jonathan, what are you monitoring this on?
714.
714, okay. So I know that Ian, you and I have already exchanged like a lot of like text messages as we've been listening. And we are having two somewhat different experiences. And I think that may lie in just the speaker array that we're able to monitor on. So I'll just get to the bottom line up front, the bluff. This is a massive upgrade over an already impeccable surround mix. The 5.1 mix, which, the Blu-ray's right there, has remained in the rotation section of my collection ever since it was released. It is a wonderful sounding and wonderfully mixed and panned 5.1 album. And it has been just reference material since release. And the Atmos mix, at least as I'm hearing it in 7.2.4, gives everything more breathing room. It doesn't lose any of the power. The rhythm section is more of a beast than ever. I am just getting power and emotion at low listening levels, moderate, cranked. It sounds beautiful. I know that for Raven, one of your criticisms was that it's like too dynamic, if that could ever be such a thing, except for classical music. For me, Raven doesn't perform quite as drastically on my system, but for Hand Cannot Erase, the dynamics are a little tighter. So you can hear all of the subtle sound effects, everything from insect noises to wind and low voices, murmurings, whispers. And then when the album is at full bombast, it's still totally comfortable on my system. Particularly, I really like how the guitars and things like hammer dulcimer are treated, where my surround sides and my surround backs have different layers of those instruments. Like acoustics might be in my wings and electrics might be in the backs, and then the hammer dulcimer is floating up above it. So positioning around you at ear level is used really effectively in this Atmos mix, and then the heights are used as additional layering and unlayering, really. So this is a knockout for me. This has caused me instantly to love Hand Cannot Erase more than I ever did. And like I was mentioning to you in private messaging, this Atmos mix has Hand Cannot Erase sounding more like Raven
Hmm.
than it ever did before. And you had made a note that the drums sound less processed
Yeah,
and
I
more
did catch
natural.
that. Yeah.
And I think that could be part of it. So listening to this Atmos mix was the first time ever that I thought, this sounds a lot like Raven. And it makes sense. It's largely the same production staff, except for the absence of Alan Parsons. It's really the same band with some additional elements like strings and banjo
And choir.
and choir. So this, more obviously than ever has, the key DNA of Raven that caused me to fall in love with it as my favorite Steven Wilson album. And man, I don't know, Hand Cannot Erase maybe might overtake the top spot. After all, this in itself is another collection of ghost stories.
Yeah. Well, it's really just one ghost story, and we'll talk about the concept in just a second. And Jonathan, I'm interested in your perspective, but I'm just going to respond to what you said, Mike, and say that I'm a little uncertain. I think that there are aspects of both mixes that I like a lot. I will say that my impression of this new mix is that it definitely does bring it back to a more natural sound. And that's probably why you're feeling it. It's more similar to Raven. Now, I was looking at the documentary about the making of this album, which is on the Blu-ray. Did it come with the Headphone Dust files?
I didn't have a chance to check it.
I think it did, but of course I didn't download it because I didn't need it. But Stephen was talking about how albums like Kate Bush's The Dreaming was a huge influence on this. So you could say that, like, whereas the Raven is more of like a 70s album, this is more like an 80s album. And I think that the Atmos mix may have stripped back some of the more 80s elements of the production. And one of the aspects to me that really jumps out is like you said, the drum sound. It almost sounds like he was gating the snare on the original mix, and that's completely absent. So to me, it changes kind of the texture of the album in a way that's taking some getting used to, but I think I like it, is the thing. I think I do like it. Now, in regards to differences in systems, I really only have one moment of this album that I prefer on the original mix. And that's the first guitar that comes in the title track, because if you listen to the original 5.1 mix, the guitars are very much up front. On my system, they're coming in the back when those heavy kind of, I guess they're kind of punky guitars come in. They're in the back, so it may be reading on your guys' sides or something. Maybe that's a different feel, but it comes across as less heavy to me. Now, on other songs, I think the guitars sound way better in the Atmos mix. I think that there is a tendency in the 5.1 mix for the guitars especially to get a little bit lost. It can be a little bit, I lost the word I was going to use. I don't know if compressed is the right word, but
congested.
Congested. Yeah, that's the word. It can become a little bit congested in the 5.1 mix. So, the instrument placement feels largely similar between the two. Again, I do notice some effects that are maybe missing from the Atmos mix. And again, that might be a choice to get this back to a more vintage sound, because all of Wilson's Atmos mixes have been tending toward a warmer sound.
Just to put it simply, like, I thought the entire mix was just less harsh, which I'm happy about, because the 5.1 mix, I feel like there are a lot of parts where it's like during the really quiet sections, like you crank it up and it sounds really good. Like, first verse of 3 Years Older, or during Ancestral, that like second half with that repeating guitar line, like you crank it up, and then when the power cuts in, like it gets really harsh. You have to turn the volume down.
Yeah,
I have that kind of problem with quite a few of the mixes he did around this period, like 2014, 2015. And in the Atmos mix, that's not a problem anymore, nor is it in the revised 5.1 version. So in terms of tonality alone, I think these mixes are better. As for the sort of spatial part of it, I think we have got to get you in a room that's got 714, because it does make a difference. I mean, for one thing, I think this is sort of a trend in a lot of Steven's recent mixes. There's a lot more movement in the mix than there was in the original version.
Yeah.
So like in 3 Years Older, there's a part where like the Rhodes is like constantly shifting around.
Yeah.
The flute moving around in Ancestral. There's a spot in the title track where like a shaker moves around the heights. So, I mean, some people might think it's gimmicky. I like that stuff personally. And there's a lot of it in the Raven Atmos mix too, like the flute and sax moving around. I think it sounds cool.
Yeah.
There's, important elements in the heights on every track. A lot of the choir parts are in the heights that you had mentioned, the strings. And something that Mike mentioned, which is one of my favorite things about Steven's Atmos mixes, is the differentiation between the sides and back. Mm-hmm. So like in a lot of the songs, like it might be like, acoustic guitar in the sides, synth in the rear, electric guitar in the front. Sometimes like the piano is in the sides. A lot of the elements that were in the front in the 5.1 mix are now in the sides in the Atmos mix, which might explain why listening to it on a 512 or 514 system, it seems kind of back heavy. But when you're listening in a system with side speakers, it gives a different effect. So yeah, I agree. I think maybe more so than Raven, I think this one really benefited from having the additional speakers, which is interesting because I think these two records, because of the nature of the way they were recorded, like it's kind of a live band all playing together in the same room. You can see that in the documentary. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are a lot of overdubs too, but there's like less layering than in some of Steven's more recent records where it was kind of just like him recording by himself, stacking tons of stuff. Like, you compare the Harmony Codex or the Overview to this, there's so much more to work with in those albums. But yet he was able to make this work really well in Atmos.
Yeah, very interesting. I thought that the Raven Atmos mix was a huge upgrade over the original. This one I feel is like a 0.1 upgrade. It's not enormous, but it is noticeable. And like one thing I noticed is I think it's in 3 Years Older. There's a guitar that's in this speaker right here that's just back left. And I don't think I even noticed that guitar in the 5.1 mix. So there's definitely some more detail. I feel like the instruments have a lot more room to breathe. Now, I'm interested, you did mention that there's a lot of stuff panning around, and I noticed a lot more of that in the Raven mix, whereas this one seems like things are kind of in the same place they were on the 5.1 mix. Now, I do feel like the heights opens up like you were talking about, Mike, like the clustered feeling that sometimes I get with the 5.1 mix. That definitely opens it up. And I was hearing some discrete elements going there. And even in my system, a lot of the mellotrons seem to be coming from above me because it's like they're positioned in the back and the heights simultaneously. I also noticed that a lot of Steven's vocals are much clearer and easier for me to understand what he's saying. And particularly in a song like Home Invasion, where he's got some really unique vocal effects going on, things bouncing around in all the speakers. I definitely felt like that effect was overtaking my room a lot more than it did in the 5.1. So yeah, I definitely feel like this is an improvement, but it does change the character of the record a little bit. And that might, for me, it's taking some getting used to. And for others, it may as well.
Yeah, I'll just say that in terms of active panning, I think he is rather restrained here. It's mostly Theo Travis and Alan Holzman parts. And it's just in select moments. And I didn't notice them until I deeply listened for I think around the third time through, closed my eyes and really tried to figure out what he was doing with the mixing, because the video presentation is so captivating here that I really was just experiencing this Atmos presentation emotionally while I was just watching the video, just riveted. Yeah. So I had to close my eyes and really, really try to focus in. In fact, I'd sent you some messages that I was like, is Theo Travis even on this thing? Like, where's he at?
Well, I think kind of the point is you're not necessarily supposed to notice it. Like sometimes the thing moving might be like a reverb or like a delay or something. Like you mentioned during the chorus of Home Invasion, the vocal effects moving around. Like it doesn't really draw attention to itself. It sort of creates this like fluid feeling, like the like room is alive. I think that's something that's really effective in a lot of Stephen's recent Atmos mixes.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you mentioned the videos, because that's actually where I wanted to move next, is talk about the presentation. But before we talk about the video presentation, we should also talk a little bit about the concept. And I was kind of refamiliarizing myself, because it had been a long time since I sat down and listened to this record all the way through. When it came out, I listened to it all the time. I saw the show, and I was interested in Stephen's interviews at the time. And this is based on a true story. A young woman named Joyce Carol Vincent, who just disappeared one day. And she wasn't found until 3 years later. She was in her apartment, and like her TV was still on, and it was like nothing had changed. And, you could be drawn to the macabre elements of this, but Wilson was drawn to the feelings of isolation that I think we all deal with in modern society, but especially living in big cities where you can just kind of disappear in plain sight like that. And, there is, to me, this theme of a desire for connection that runs through the whole record. And, obviously much of what Wilson has done with her story is fictionalized. He's brought a lot of his own imagination, a lot of his own experiences into it. But as Mike, as you said, like, whereas The Raven That Refused to Sing is a collection of ghost stories, this is more like just one ghost story. And I want to credit Lasse Hoyle's filmmaking for communicating some pretty nuanced and heavy and complex ideas visually. When I sat down and watched this and listened to it for the first time through the Headphone Dust download, I was overtaken by my emotional response to the films, to the music, and I really wasn't able to assess properly the mix at all. I think that the elephant in the room is the Routine video, which I hadn't seen since the show in 2015. And, you would think that it would be the shot of her blood falling onto the plates, like that might get me, or the heavy guitar and drum parts that come in the last third of the song. But it's actually the very ending, try to let go, don't let go. That was just so moving.
When she's like on the edge of the cliff, like that part.
Yeah. That's just, that's so stirring to me.
I was literally in tears. And so I'm glad you brought up Routine, because that's the part of the concept that I would argue most strongly that doesn't really follow even a fictionalized version of Joyce Carol Vincent, because with Joyce Carol Vincent, you have a young, socially active, attractive person who is nonetheless able to disappear because presumably everybody else is so busy with, all their other connections and their responsibilities and their interests and everything, that they just didn't find it weird that they hadn't heard from somebody that they love for over 2 years. And with Routine, you have a mother coping with the loss of her 2 children and husband in what we are kind of, it's suggested to be an accident, a tragic accident.
Yeah.
So that's the part of that I would just argue that this is possibly seeded. The concept is seeded by Joyce Carol Vincent's life and Wilson's fictionalization of it. But I struggle to know how Routine would really fit into that story. And it is the only song that gets its own stop motion movie.
Yeah.
So I think, even that kind of suggests that it's maybe a bit of a departure, or maybe it's Joyce Carol Vincent thinking of her aunt or something.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the Routine, I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that as you mentioned, like the story of the album is just sort of inspired by Joyce Carol Vincent. So
Yeah.
this female protagonist of the novel is not Joyce Carol Vincent. It's like a different person inspired by her story. But I think they tell you in the album or in the deluxe edition or something that the character collects like newspaper clippings and things, and the story of Routine is like on one of the newspapers. So it's kind of like a story within a story that's not related to the main narrative. But you brought up a good point, which is that I think everybody knows like what inspired the album, but the narrative kind of loses me at certain points. Like you can understand like 3 years older is kind of like the character's early life to when they move to the city.
Yeah.
And then Routine, as we mentioned, is not really related to the main storyline. And then I think Ancestral is kind of like, do I disappear forever or do I come back? Like that sort of stop and start, thick as a brick section kind of represents like the indecision.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you're kind of left wondering like, what happened? Did they go back to their family? Did they die? I never quite fully understood like how it resolves. But I think like with any concept album, at the end of the day, like the songs have to stand apart from the story.
Yeah.
You know, you think about an album like The Who's Tommy, like if you know nothing about the story, the songs are still good.
Yeah.
Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I would say the same thing. And I think that applies here as well. But one of the things that's great about Steven Wilson as an artist is it's always like a multimedia package.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's always it's never just about the music. There's always all this extra stuff to reinforce it. Like, you know, the great music videos, the stage show. And I think, you know, it's debatable as to whether this or a different one could be his best album. I think for me, it's also my number 2, though I bet my number 1 is different than your guys's. But I think if you look at the whole package of what this is, like the story, the songs themselves, all the promo work they did when it came out. My understanding was there was like an online diary of the character that was online. Yep. So when you put all of that together, I think it's in his catalog, it's kind of unmatched, like the amount of work that went into it, if you look at it as one big thing. So even if it's not necessarily my favorite one, it might be the most impressive of his solo catalog. I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know.
Well, you could compare it very easily to Thick as a Brick. Where you had a fully fledged newspaper that was included with the album that the band worked on and wrote and had all these little inside jokes in. I mean, that's obviously a Monty Python-esque parody album of progressive rock. This is something that's meant to take itself more seriously. But, you know, I agree with what you said. Like as a multimedia package, it's very creative, very inventive. And I think the themes of isolation and withdrawal kind of permeate throughout all of these songs. And my favorite on the album is Home Invasion, Regret Number 9. I think that's an outstanding concert number. I mean, I think he's probably played it on every one of his tours since then.
And it's interesting how like the Regret Number 9, the solos have kind of taken a life of their own in the live show. Like we've heard all these different versions of that guitar solo, like, you know, Randy McStein on the latest live album, Alex Hutchings on the Royal Albert Hall. So yeah, I think the original solo is still my favorite though.
Yeah, it's mine as well, but it's almost like the Zappa approach to instant composition. You know, like Frank released several albums of nothing but guitar solos. And Regret Number 9 is kind of like the Steven Wilson version of that. But I also wanted, since we're talking about the video presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the film for Regret Number 9. Because that's my favorite film that's included, because we're kind of entering into her eye. And the way that the camera moves is just very uncomfortable. It's very slow. And we see her, and at first there's an uncanny sort of feeling to her face, like it's kind of distorted as we get closer and closer and closer. And you get the feeling as you get to the final kind of iteration of the woman who's the main character. We get just so close, but she doesn't let us in. And then it pulls back. And, you know, I find that very effective personally.
Well, you know, I also want to say, like, the idea, I don't know why they never thought in the past to put the music videos in with the surround mixes. Like none of the Blu-rays ever did that. I think some of them don't even have the videos at all. I mean, famously, the overview film still has never been released in full.
Yeah, this one does.
Yeah, I mean, so even for people who were like kind of skeptical, like, well, are these new mixes better than what I had on Blu-ray already or not? Just being able to watch the video in tandem with the surround sound, I think is worth getting these downloads. I mean, for those of us who are kind of tech savvy, like I've just been doing it myself all these years, like, you know, ripping the 5.1 or Atmos for the Blu-ray and trying to make my own MKV, lining it up with the video. So yeah, I think that's, you know, it's great that they're using the MKV format for, you know, both the audio and video portion of it. I mean, with IAA stuff, I always get frustrated whenever there's some kind of visual asset that we're not able to use because, you know, it wasn't cleared or whatever. So no, I think that's probably one of the best features of this whole new endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. So guys, I'm just kind of probably going to edit here, but what else do we want to talk about? Is there anything else we want to focus on in this discussion?
The lack of chapters on the MKV is kind of frustrating.
Yeah. Now,
are there really no chapters, or is it just the device you're using doesn't read them?
The device.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting discussion about, you know, playback options. Like if there's a way that I could enjoy the Atmos mix and be able to select the songs that I wish to, that would be great. But at least on the Neumi Atom 4K, you can't do that.
No.
I mean, you know, I have a different perspective on the presentation of the MKVs versus what they're doing. So yeah. But it's sort of an open question as to whether people want them as one chunk or as separate chunks. It seems like if you've seen on the forum, the debate is kind of even. Like there's as many people who like it as one piece as who don't. So I don't know.
Yeah, that is interesting. So, I mean, obviously, I think I prefer having it as one chunk because my Neumi puts pauses in between the tracks, and I think that would be super distracting for an album like this. Now, we did get a comment on the video that Mike and I did. I think it was from Steven's manager or his webmaster, or maybe they're the same person. I don't know. But he said that there are chapter stops in it and you can access it thusly. So there are different ways to play this back. So we should probably inform everyone, as we always do when we do these videos, that probably the most affordable / entry-level device is the Neumi Atom 4K. Which you can just hook a hard drive into. It hooks into a TV through a USB or a HDMI into your receiver, and it works mostly flawlessly. But there are kind of more pricey options that might give you a little bit more control. So you guys want to just talk about those briefly if you've tried any of those?
So far, I've tried just my Blu-ray players and my AVR itself and the Neumi Atom 4K. I'm yet to explore other devices, but I intend to. They're on my agenda.
Yeah, I've heard good things about the NVIDIA Shield, but I feel like it's kind of expensive for what it is. Yeah. It's like $200 for like a streaming web player. Yeah. And then you have the Neumi that does like almost everything the same for like $40. It's like,
yeah.
My take on it with the chapters is if you give them to people separately, you know that you'll always be able to pick songs. Mm-hmm. And if you want to stick them all together, like you can do that with free software. Like it's pretty easy to do. Whereas if you give it as one chunk, chances are there might be some people who will lose functionality. But of course, on the flip side of that, you could slice it into pieces if you wanted to. So I don't know. I think if you give people the separate chapters, at the end of the day, you're sort of addressing the issue of control for the whole audience.
Yeah.
And it also helps with the download process because you're downloading a bunch of like 1 to 2 gigabyte chunks instead of a like 30 gig file, you know? So I don't know. I mean, I'm curious what people in the comments have to say about this.
So I brought the Neumi remote here. Sorry if my camera is shaking. But you can actually push this arrow here and hold it down, and it will search through the file. You can also pause and pick up. I mean, it's been weeks or months later, and it will pick up where you left off. So while I can see this as not being ideal for most people, I personally, you know, I kind of like how IAA has presented some titles, where you might have one track, which is unbroken, but you have the option also to download as separate tracks if you want to do that. And so I think that that's one way that Headphone Dust could address this issue. You know, it's like make a one size fits all a choice that anybody, you know, if you want to have the full thing, it's there. If you want to have the separate tracks, they're there. But yeah, personally, it's not a huge deal for me. I've kind of gotten used to it. And this isn't really one of those albums that I want to hear a track out of isolation from. I mean, they work just fine in isolation, but generally I want to hear the whole thing as an experience.
Yeah.
So I'm on team separate tracks personally. And then I like the idea of also including one big chunk, especially for like a concept record. If you have sections that are best presented with gapless playback, I like your idea of just presenting both and let people download whatever they want.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason this is a controversy is just because of the nature of how Atmos works. It being like you have to listen to it as a bit stream, whereas like with Flax, like they just play gaplessly because it's PCM. So you can give people the separate tracks and there's no, you know, breaking issues. But, you know, that's just kind of the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
Yeah. So usually at this point in our discussions, we talk about maybe what we'd like to see next from Headphone Dust. And I mean, yeah, obviously To the Bone would be great. As Jonathan
my favorite Steven Wilson album.
Yeah, that's, and we kind of talked about that on our spring announcement video that we just did. That the To the Bone surround mix is maybe my least favorite of his solo albums. It's very heavy-handed and compressed sounding to me, and it kind of stands out from his other work. So I think that one could be a huge leap in terms of an Atmos upgrade.
It's interesting to me that you said you thought Hand Cannot Erase had like an 80s vibe. I thought To the Bone was like the 80s throwback album.
Even more so.
Yeah. And the Future Bites too also has a lot of 80s elements. Yeah.
Yeah. When I'm talking about Hand Cannot Erase being 80s sounding, I'm talking very minute detail. I'm talking about like Marco's snare being a little bit gated at times or something like that. You know, this is really close, intense listening because as I said earlier, like the original Hand Cannot Erase Blu-ray, I think is still one of the best surround mixes ever. I mean, 11 years later, it still sounds terrific. And it's probably going to be good enough for most people, really. But I do think that the improvement here it's noticeable. It's like a +1 or a +2, but it is noticeable.
Well, so to go back to your question of what would I like to see next, I'd like to see some stuff that's never been mixed in surround before. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to these things that are like upgrades of titles that were already released on Blu-ray, which are great. Don't get me wrong. You know, I love listening in Atmos, but there are a number of sort of these extra songs from Steven's catalog that were recorded at the same time as some of these albums and maybe didn't make the cut. Like that 4.5 record was kind of made up of these leftover songs. Yeah. That could be one that could be done in Atmos. That would be cool. But there are also these extra songs that have only been released in stereo that are included usually in the deluxe editions. So like from To the Bone, there's a song called How Big the Space that I think had lyrics written by Andy Partridge. It's a good track. From the Future Bites, there's like a whole extra album of extra tracks. Some would say they're better than what's on the album. I know Mike is in that camp. But there are a lot of these extra songs, and it would be cool if those could be put together in some kind of compilation or something, because they've never been heard in surround before, and they're really good.
I know.
So that's my vote.
4.5 expanded version. Let's give 4.5 the Living in the Past deluxe treatment.
Yeah. I already really love 4.5, so I'm glad you guys have brought that up. And to see it expanded would be killer.
Well, I will say this: 4.5 is the one Steven Wilson record I don't own. So that would probably be my choice for the next kind of Headphone Dust release, because I'm holding off on buying it because I'm thinking, well, if he's revisiting Hand Cannot Erase and The Raven, isn't it inevitable that at some point he might address that one? I will also bring up a couple of things I'd like to see, because obviously I caught these tours. The Raven Refused to Sing and Hand Cannot Erase, and there are songs and there are arrangements from those tours that are still yet to be released. One of them is the No Twilight / Remainder of the Black Dog encore that I got in Pittsburgh, and that's still one of my very favorite Steven live moments because it was heavy.
We should mention that there was no live Blu-ray from either the Raven or Hand tours.
Right. And the index from Hand Cannot Erase was evil. And I've loved that since 2015, and there's no official release of it. I mean, you can see it. There's the Yahoo concert, which I probably think I have somewhere. But it would be nice to see these solo tours get released, even if it's just audio only. But Steven's recorded them, so he's got to have them somewhere. And I don't know. Anything else on your guys' wish lists?
As far as Steven Wilson material is concerned, anything that hasn't yet received the Atmos treatment, I would be up for. But I would be at least as interested in some of the catalog work he's done for other groups. Like, I think it has been announced that he's going to put Atmos presentation of The Power and the Glory by Gentle Giant up on Headphone Dust. I just don't think it's happened yet. So if that is the harbinger of good things to come, that would be super exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a whole other discussion, and it's a question as to what the labels will allow him to release. So I'm very interested in that as well. We could do a whole separate video of, what catalog mixes I'd like to see him do again in Atmos, because he's already done a lot of them, but there are some that maybe are not popular enough to warrant a physical release. Like I'm thinking of something like, Spectral Mornings by Steve Hackett is another good example. If he can go back and do some of that stuff in Atmos, that would be really cool. But I think as far as like Steven Wilson material goes, he said that like 2011 is kind of the cutoff point as to where the session files are easily accessible for that stuff. So that doesn't really leave a ton of options. I think he will do To the Bone. I think he said as much that he would do it. Yeah. The live stuff I think is a good idea. But like then a lot of sort of his other projects, like the earlier albums, I would love In Absentia and Deadwing, but I don't think he can do them. I mean, I think he would have done Fear of a Blank Planet if it were possible. Like the early Blackfield records, I think would be cool. I think 1 and 2 never had a surround release, but the session files are probably not available for those. So I don't know, maybe, if this venture takes off and there's demand for this stuff, he'll be willing to sort of go through whatever difficulties there are in getting the multi-tracks available for that stuff. So
if my memory serves, he has said that it doesn't only come down to accessibility of session files, but that some of his earliest material just wasn't recorded in a way that can withstand the scrutiny of being unlayered in surround or immersive. So I think we have to accept that at a certain point too.
I think that was sort of in reference to a lot of like the 90s Porcupine Tree stuff, like those early records. And I think that stuff was probably recorded like on ADAT, like on some kind of digital tape. Yeah. But like I would say any of the ones that have been mixed in surround so far, like from I think Stupid Dream is the oldest one that had a surround mix from 1999. So like anything from that far back, I would think would sound good in surround if the elements are available for it.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing stopping him from doing new 5.1 mixes of some of those, maybe not an Atmos mix, but
or just putting out the old 5.1 mixes. I mean, if you want the DVD of Stupid Dream, you got to go on eBay and probably pay a lot of money for it. And some of the 5.1 mixes of those albums were brickwalled. Things certainly were. So if they could even put out like remastered or like flat transfer versions of those, that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And the other problem is I was able to find Stupid Dream and Light Bulb Sun and a few of those late 90s ones And I didn't pay too much for them, but the problem I'm running into is that the DVD menus don't really cooperate with my 4K player. So they're kind of a hassle to play because the menus are kind of they're old. They're just kind of too old, and they'll crash often.
Sometimes when you load up some of those old DVD discs, like I was listening to Queen: A Night at the Opera recently, like the 4:3 menus like really have not aged well. Like you can tell this was meant to be looked at like a CRT TV. Like that's how old some of these releases are. So yeah, I mean, you know, my attitude is just to convert everything to FLAC and play those. But I know some people like their discs, so.
You know, just one comment that I wanted to make. I don't know how important it will be to anybody ever, but you know how we were recently talking about how Grace Under Pressure is Rush's most emotional album.
Mm-hmm.
And I would make that case for Hand Cannot Erase, which is a remarkable thing when it is, you know, seeded from this idea of isolation and detachment.
Mm-hmm.
How he, like you said, I don't think he really honed in on the macabre aspect of the story, but on the tragedy. And it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Where, you know, if we get so wrapped up in the minutia of life, we might be missing out on loved ones around us that need our support.
Yeah.
Or, you know, from whom we haven't heard from in a while, or we haven't reached out. And, you know, death comes for us all, and our time here on earth is finite.
Yeah. Well,
like
it's
the falling
interesting.
of a leaf, you know, life is very brief, you know. So I really more and more these days, I'm interested in the technical aspects of recordings, and I always will be to some extent, but it's the albums that make me feel something.
Yeah.
And, you know, for you and me as well, with Home Invasion and particularly Routine, you know, how in concert he talked about he wanted to write the saddest song he possibly could. And man, he did.
Yeah.
And, you know, this album isn't all sad, but it's on that side, just like Raven. And, you know, it's important. You know, we all find it, you know, I think easier to celebrate with people when things are going well, or for, you know, happy life markers like a birthday or something. But our loneliness and our sadness and our disappointments are, I think, what we should pay more attention to. And that's something that I really value out of Wilson's work. I think he's really doing humanity a favor by underscoring the point and reminding us that, you know, it's especially in this digital age, it's all too easy to be isolated, to be siloed. You know, our phones are siloing us all the time. So, you know, for all of you watching, reach out to your loved ones if you haven't in a while. You know, I have to remind myself to do so. And so that's one thing that I really appreciate about this record. Even though it, you know, it is seeded from the concept of isolation, it can be something that can spur us to develop further connection.
Yeah. You know, what I keep thinking of is many of the great and renowned concept albums have this isolation theme running through them, from The Wall to something like OK Computer or Kid A by Radiohead. What makes this album different from those? And that's an open question to you guys and even our commenters. What makes this album different?
The only thing I can add to that is I thought I read recently that it's being turned into a stage play.
Is that right?
We have Hand Cannot Erase play. I don't think Steven is involved in it, but he like endorsed it. So that'll be interesting to see.
I'd pay to go see that.
Yeah. Yeah, but and it's something about using the technology, I guess, to convey these ideas, I think is what makes this album beautiful, from the films to the mix. I mean, obviously The Wall has a film, but it's its own heavy kind of arduous experience. But there is something about this, and I guess those other albums that I mentioned that are like borderline therapeutic in the end. They force us to maybe engage with some uncomfortable truths, but in the end, it's like we're engaging with them in a safe environment that allows us to come out of it with some sort of understanding. And yeah, maybe pick up the phone and call somebody and say, "Hey, how you been? What's going on?" Because you kind of feel like his character is in that headspace near the end of the record, like when she's writing to her brother or whatever and reaching out. And then she kind of fades out, or, you know, even the imagery suggests maybe extraterrestrials are involved or something, you know, the, the ascendant Huron imagery. So,
well, have you guys noticed how musically and sonically the album ends the way that it begins?
Yeah, it does. It loops. It's just like The Wall. It loops back.
Like a big loop.
Yeah. But, yeah, so this story just continues to play out. Much like The Wall does. So, guys, I want to thank you for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun talking about this album. It's been a lot of fun really revisiting this album and kind of remembering its place within my own history and being able to see this stuff live. One thing that I'm learning is that as I get older, this resonates with me more than it used to, which is a very interesting thing. So I'd be curious what people think of this if they're revisiting it, how they're feeling about it, how they feel about the new Atmos mix. Definitely let us know in the comments below. Yeah, your thoughts in general, your reaction to our discussion. Also, don't forget to, if you haven't, subscribe to these guys' channels, Mike Vieira's Life and Surround, as well as Jonathan Cornell's Immersive Audio Album. So yeah, thanks again, guys. It's been lots of fun, and hopefully we get together soon and talk about the power and the glory. I think that would be that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm in for that for sure. And hey, it's been great to connect with you guys today, and to everyone watching, good to connect with you too.
All right, guys, take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Until next time.